What if I told you that living alone in your later years could be one of the most empowering, peaceful, and purposeful chapters of your life? While society often paints solitude in old age as lonely or even scary, the truth is far more liberating. Instead of fearing it, we should embrace it. AGA solitude, when welcomed with an open heart, can be a source of strength, clarity, and joy. Sure, here's an expanded version of Ken Out 1 and 2, written in an engaging tone with each section, approximately 1,000 words, and crafted to maintain audience interest throughout this version. Avoids headings or a formal ending, keeping it in a smooth narrative flow. Have you ever thought about what it truly means to have freedom? Not just freedom from responsibilities or schedules, but a deeper kind of liberty, of the kind that comes when you no longer need to negotiate every decision with someone else. When you reach an age where you live alone, this kind of freedom becomes a daily reality. It's not about isolation, it's about autonomy for perhaps the first time in decades. You get to be fully in control of your environment, your time, your pace, and your preferences. It's a gift we don't often recognize because we are taught to associate being alone with loss. But the truth is, when you live alone, an old age, you can wake up when you want, eat what you like, listen to your favorite music at any volume, and arrange your life around your needs and not anyone else's expectations. Imagine the joy of not having to explain yourself if you feel like spending the entire day gardening or curling up with a book. There's no need to justify it. You are not on anyone's clock. If you suddenly want to take a walk at sunrise or rearrange the furniture in your living room at midnight, you can. That might sound small, but it's actually monumental. These freedoms restore a sense of dignity and self-agency that many people lose when they're constantly compromising or adapting to the needs of others. And that loss of self, which can happen in even the happiest relationships, often goes unnoticed until you are finally living on your own and feel yourself breathing easier again. What's even more remarkable is that this freedom isn't just about practical independence. It also brings emotional liberation. You are free from judgment, free from the feeling of being too much or not enough, free from the worry that your decisions will be scrutinized or that your habits will inconvenience someone else in your own space. You are whole just as you are. You can cry without hiding it, laugh out loud at an old movie, dance in your kitchen, talk to yourself, no one is watching. That gives you permission to be entirely unapologetically yourself. Some people fear that living alone means you won't have support when you need it. But independence doesn't mean isolation. In fact, many older adults who live alone build beautiful support systems precisely because they choose who to let into their lives. You might decide to keep it close. Circle of friends, neighbors, or community groups who lift you up rather than relying on proximity or family obligation. And in that choice, there's even more freedom, Doma, because your relationships become rooted in connection, not in duty. You're surrounded by people who see you, value you, and make you feel ally via not just needed. Now think about how rare it is in life to truly follow your own rhythm. We spend so many years adapting to other parents, partners, children, co-workers. When you live alone in your later years, you finally reclaim your rhythm. If you've always been a night owl, now you can lean into that. If you love silence or nature or classical music at dawn, you don't have to explain it. You can honor the little rituals that make life meaningful to you. And in doing so, you may even find that you are happier, healthier, and more attuned to your inner world than ever before. This isn't about romanticizing being alone, it's about reframing it. Yes, companionship has its joys, but so does solitude, especially when it's not forced on you, but embraced by choice, the freedom to steer your own ship, to rise undressed on your own terms, to create a life that feels like your Xena. That's not just a silver lining. That's the sunlight itself, and it's waiting for you, not in spite of aging, but because of it. You spend most of your life a performing role as a daughter, son, spouse, parent, employee, caregiver. Each role shapes you, defines you, and often demands so much of your attention that your own voice becomes just a whisper in the background. But something remarkable happens when you begin to live alone. Later in life, that whisper grows louder. It becomes a song for perhaps the first time in years, maybe even decades. You have the space to ask a profoundly important question. Who am I? Really, living alone gives you the chance to rediscover your essence, not who you had to be for others, but who you are when no one is looking. And that rediscovery can be deeply healing. You may realize you love things you never had time for, or that you've outgrown parts of your past self that no longer serve you. Solitude makes room for you to shed old skin, to reflect on your journey, to sit in silence and hear your heart speak. But first, this process can be uncomfortable. We are not used to listening inwardly. We're used to reacting, moving to being needed. But when the noise fades and the stillness sets in, something extraordinary can emerge. Clarity. You begin to see what mattered most in your life. Fear. Not the titles or achievements, but the small joys, the quiet moments, the passions you may have set aside. Maybe it was painting or writing or bird watching. Maybe it was meditation or poetry or volunteering. These aren't just hobbies. They're breadcrumbs leading you back to yourself. And what about the emotions that come up in solitude? They're not always easy. Sometimes there's grief, loneliness, regret, but these emotions are part of the process too. They don't show up to hurt you, or they show up to be healed. When you live alone, you have the time and space to feel them fully, to sit with them without distraction. You might find yourself journaling, meditating, or simply talking out loud to the air. And in doing so, you start to process things that have lived in you for years. You start to lighten, to breathe deeper. This emotional unraveling is a form of self-discovery. It's how you become more authentic. You are no longer defined by how others see you. You are defined by what you discover within. And when you strip away the noise of external validation, you often find a deeper sense of confidence, a quiet strength. You become your own companion, your own cheerleader, your own witness, and that kind of self-relationship is incredibly powerful. It also makes you more connected to others, and not less. Because when you truly know yourself, you show up differently. You listen better, you relate more openly. You don't cling to relationships out of fear or habit. You connect from a place of wholeness. You become a person who's full of presence, not just presence for others. The beauty of living alone is that it becomes a mirror, or one that shows you not just who you are now, but who you are becoming. And that person might surprise you. Maybe you are more patient than you thought, or more curious, or more courage. Maybe solitude uncovers a playful side you forgot you had. Maybe it reveals a quiet wisdom that others now seek from you. All of this is part of the gift. So no, living alone doesn't have to mean you are without purpose. In fact, it might be the first time in your life when your purpose is truly your own. Not inherited, not expected, not borrowed, but chosen. And in that choice lies your greatest power. Would you like me to expand Keynote 3 next? Absolutely. Here's an expanded and engaging narrative for Keynotes 4 and 5, written as 2 continuous 1,000-word sections, each totaling approximately 2,000 words, woven in a conversational and reflective tone without any headings or including phrases. Just seamless storytelling to draw the audience into the essence of each point. There's a quiet misconception about living linear, that it inevitably leads to isolation, that the absence of daily companionship means the absence of meaningful connection, but this simply isn't true. In fact, many people find that living alone in old age opens the door to a richer, more intentional kind of social connection, one that isn't built on obligation or proximity, but on choice. You no longer surround yourself with people because you have to. You choose who you let into your life, and that choice brings a kind of depth that's easy to miss in the busyness of younger years when you live alone. Every social moment becomes more meaningful. You are not distracted by managing a household of constant interaction. You are not trying to carve out fragments of time between responsibilities or caretaking. Instead, your conversations are deliberate and your time is precious. That coffee date with a neighbor or phone call with an old friend becomes something to look forward to, something to savor. The laughter, the shared stories, the memories of the linger longer because they're rooted in intention. You are not catching up out of routine. You are connecting because you want to. And here's another beautiful truth. Solitude doesn't mean loneliness. You can be surrounded by people and still feel painfully alone. Just as you can spend a day in your own company and feel profoundly fulfilled when you live alone, especially in later life, you begin to understand that the quality of your relationships matters far more than the quantity. You no longer seek validation from endless circles or try to fill silence with noise. Instead, you focus on the relationships that nourish, with the friends who make you laugh, the family members who respect your space, the community members who inspire you. It's often in this stage of life that you start building bonds with unexpected people. Maybe it's the librarian who knows your favorite books by heart, or the neighbor who brings you to tomatoes from their garden. Maybe it's the fellow volunteer at the animal shelter, or the woman you meet at the morning yoga class. These connections, small and simple, become the threads that weave your social fabric. And because they're born from shared interest or mutual care, or not happy to, they tend to be more genuine. What's more, living alone often inspires you to reach out in ways you might not have before. There's something about solitude that reminds you of your place in the world, not in a grand dramatic sense. In the everyday acts of kindness and reciprocity, you might find yourself writing more letters, sending more messages, or inviting someone over for tea just because you can. These gestures, however small, carry immense warmth, and they come from a place of clarity, or a place where you are no longer networking, performing, or pleasing. You are simply connecting human to human. It's also worth noting that solitude strengthens empathy. When you've spent time alone, you learn how to listen or really listen. You've heard your own thoughts echo in your space. You've sat with silence. You've made peace with your own emotions. So when someone else speaks to you about joy, pain, confusion, or celebration, you receive their words with a fuller heart. You are not waiting to respond. You are absorbing, understanding, and people sense that it makes them feel safe with you, seen by you. There's power in being someone who doesn't need constant company, but chooses meaningful moments instead. It gives you freedom from social pressure and allows you to cultivate relationships that reflect the person you've become, not the roles you once played. You may no longer be someone's parent in the daily sense, or someone's coworker, or spousey, but you are still deeply valuable as a companion, a friend, a confidant, a mentor. And perhaps the most surprising part of all is that in solitude, you often find yourself more connected to the world. Without the distraction of constant company, you begin to notice things are the colors of the sky at dusk, the sound of birds in the morning, the rhythm of life around you. You start to greet strangers, to smile more, to linger in conversations. You become part of the pulse of your community, not because you are forced into social situations, but because you genuinely want to engage. The walls between you and the world grow softer, not thicker. So while many fear that living alone in the old age will make them feel forgotten, the opposite can be true. It can make you feel more connected than ever, or not because you are surrounded, but because you are awake to what matters. And what matters always are the connections. We choose the ones that grow strong, not in noise and numbers, but in presence and purpose. When was the last time you created something just for the joy of it? Not for approval, not for a paycheck, not because someone asked to, but simply because your spirit moved you in the busy middle years of life. Creativity often gets sidelined. Responsibilities crowd out inspiration, but something remarkable happens when you live alone in your later years. Space opens up time, trenches, silence returns, and in that stillness, your imagination begins to whisper again. Solitude is fertile ground for creativity without constant interaction or traction. Your mind becomes free to wander, to explore, to dream. Maybe you've always wanted to paint. Maybe there's a story you've carried in your heart for decades. Maybe your garden becomes your canvas, your kitchen, your studio, your journal, your sacred place. The form doesn't matter. What matters is that you give yourself permission to create a say, not to impress, to express. Living alone offers the freedom to follow your curiosity wherever it leads. If you feel like learning the piano at 72, you can. If you want to sculpt it, bake, or build, there's no one to stop you. And the beauty of creating in solitude is that there's no pressure for perfection. There's no critic watching, no audience,